Dang. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Let me unmute myself. Can you hear me? Oh, good. I'm waiting for our producer to be here to guide me through all this. Oh, there's okay, another one. Yeah, sure. Okay. Jarvis, yes.
Hello there.
Okay.
Hey, Richard.
Hello.
How you doing? Hey, everybody.
Okay, I've already admitted some people. Yeah, but there's one person here who they just says iPhone. So how do I tell them? Yeah, how do I tell them to give me their real name?
Just do that. They should be able to hear you.
Suppose it's a troll.
Did you let them?
iPhone?
If they're not in the room yet, they may not be able to hear you.
Trying to think about Miguel. Who the heck is Miguel?
Hello?
All right. Well, I
Hey,
will,
Sheila, you're visible.
Am I visible?
No, it just says iPhone, and then it has 2, and then it says guest. So it must be 2 people who have iPhones.
Sheila, yours says Sheila White's iPhone. You're good.
Okay. All right. I'll do that then. The name. Okay. Right. Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. I'll do that right now. Well, now we have 11 people in the meeting. All right. Very good. All right. See ya.
Can you hear me? Can you still hear Sheila?
Miguel.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Sheila.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Because my phone, I can't even see y'all now. I don't know what's going on with my phone. Okay, I found it on my iPad. I'm going to turn the phone off.
Okay. Who's this?
This Sheila, it's on my iPad, but it's saying, please wait for the meeting host. Turn it to my iPad so I can turn my phone off. Okay, wait a minute. I think that's me. Was that me?
Okay. What's that?
Okay. I don't know what that is. Hold on.
You gotta turn one of your devices
I
off.
am. That's
Thank you.
I turned my phone off.
Okay.
That never happened to me before. I use this for school. Hello?
Hello?
Okay, is that fine? I don't hear.
Okay, that's better, yeah.
Yeah, that's better to me too, yeah.
All righty. Well, we had 40, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
okay, good. We had 40 people RSVP, but obviously not all 40 people are going to be here at 1 o'clock. So,
Were some
I
people
guess
looking at it? Were some
What's
people
that?
looking at it on Facebook Live or something?
yes, I'm about to turn on Facebook Live now.
They might be there.
No, well, that's true. Okay, all right. Let's let these people in, and then I'll go to Facebook. Okay, Facebook. Yeah.
Richard,
Yes, can you hear me?
this is Gloria. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you see me?
No, because I moved the screen to Facebook. So hold on a second.
All right.
Yeah, you're right. ER ship. Some people did go directly to Facebook. Let's see
I've
what
done
we
this
can do
before.
about that. Okay. All right. All right. Let me respond to this person. Oh, there's somebody else. Okay. Okay. Okay, now let me go back to Zoom. Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
Hello, Richard Prince speaking. Mute the mic, okay. Okay, is it mute? Muted? All right, let me see. Yeah, that's what I clicked about mute. Mute my.
Now we can't hear you.
Every time, that's me. Every time I go to my iPad, it does. It's on mute.
You have to get out of Zoom, Sheila.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
How are
Hi
you?
there, how you doing?
All right, how's it going?
Great. I think Richard is still trying to figure out how to coordinate all of this.
Right.
He muted himself.
Oh, we have?
Himself.
He'll get it before the day's out.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I did already.
Richard,
Yeah.
you really need a co-host who can help you with all the bells and whistles.
Yeah,
while
and they
you're-
also sent me messages. Oh, wait a minute. I got to mute myself here.
Well, we can have a conversation.
Right?
God, your name is spelled wrong. Oh no, it's not. I think you have
No,
an
my
or
name
an
is
T-O.
spelled right. This is my Zoom name. My Zoom name. You know,
How do you pronounce that?
what's that?
Buruto? Buruto?
Right. There it is. That sounds good. I like that. You rolled that tongue. Do that again. Do that again. You rolled your
Oh,
tongue.
Baruto.
Yeah, I like that. I wish I could roll my tongue because now we'll go around and say that. I don't know why I'm Baruto.
I see Mary Curtis is on. Mary, are you hearing us? Who else is here that I know?
Hi, Ship.
Yes, I'm here.
Nicholas, how are you?
Okay, can
Hi, how
everybody
you
hear
doing?
me?
Great.
I had to unmute myself, Ship.
Oh, hi,
Okay.
Mary. How are you?
Let
Can
me,
people hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we
No.
can.
I heard you before.
just had to go in the kitchen, so you didn't need to see me.
Well,
Did
see the
Everybody.
girlfriend is working.
Yeah, she got the apron on. She's ready to go.
She's cooking up another column.
Ah,
Yeah.
I wish.
Oh,
Chicken stew.
no, don't mute me. Edit profile picture.
So we have 25 participants, I see.
Hello, can people hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
Richard.
We've
Yes,
been hearing
okay,
you all
good.
along,
We
Richard.
heard you all
One
along,
person
Richard.
can hear me now. All right.
There's a lot of people on here.
I guess we're ready to start. We have about 25 people.
Plus
So,
Facebook.
let me welcome everybody to the Journal-isms Roundtable. Let me get my notes here. Well, I can remember what we're supposed to say. All right, welcome to the Journal-isms Roundtable. My name is Richard Prince, and we have a stellar crew here, an all-star group of journalists who I'm happy to have. More will be joining us. I want to extend a special hello to the people on Facebook Live. This is the first time we're doing it on Facebook Live. And for those who aren't familiar with our roundtable, we've been doing this since 1999. That is meeting monthly with our group of journalists in Washington, D.C. And as I said, this is the first time after, well, this is our second time with Zoom and our first time with Facebook Live. I want to announce that we have our guest for next week already, of next month. Hold on a second. Yeah, our guest for next month will be Bill Drummond. Some of you may know him. He worked for the Los Angeles Times for many years, and he now teaches at the University of California at Berkeley, where he started a program at San Quentin Prison to train the inmates into having their own newspaper.
Wow.
And that's going strong now. And this is if you can see his book. Wait a minute. Prison Truth. All right. This just came out. And so he'll be here to talk about that next month, which will be one of the first Tuesdays in June. We haven't settled on the date yet.
That's exciting.
Also wanted to make sure that people know that this is being recorded, so the people who can't see it now can tune in later on. Zoom has that recording feature. So let's, I guess, go with our introduction so that we can find out who all is here. And I guess can start with Eric, who's the new director of the Fund for Investigative Journalism, Eric Ferraro. Can you hear me, Eric?
I can. Can you hear me,
I
Richard?
can hear you. All right.
Oh, the magic works. It's so wonderful to be with you all. My name's Eric Ferraro, and I just started work last week as the new. Oh, I'm getting a note that I'm being muted by the host. No?
You have been muted by the host.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you yet.
Host, unmute him.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, Richard, you have all kinds of power there to mute and unmute people. So you'll just give us the hook as you deem fit. I started as executive director of the Fund for Investigative Journalism this week, and I'm thrilled to join you guys. I bring regards from Cheryl Thompson and Lottie Joyner on our board of directors, who have attended many of these with you all in the past, and look forward to attending many future ones. And I'm grateful to Richard Prince and Bonita Bing and others for helping set this up and inviting me. And I'm thrilled to be here to connect with some new friends and to see some old friends, including Nikita Stewart, whose book I simply cannot wait to read. It's already on pre-order, Nikita, and I can't wait to hear you talk about it today too. So Richard, I'm happy to say a few more words when you want me to, but I don't want to take too much time and get myself muted again. So thank you so much for having me. It's a thrill to see you all.
Richard, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yay! All right. Okay, Eric Falcaro, your turn.
Hi, grateful to be here. My name's Eric. I am the editor at Street Sense Media, and we're a street paper in Washington, D.C., much like Joanne Sewell's paper in Portland. And we're one of 40 in the U.S. and over 100 worldwide. We focus on homelessness and poverty locally, and we also provide job opportunities to people experiencing homelessness or who are formerly homeless to work selling the paper.
Great. Okay. So glad you're here. Chip. Sorry.
Sorry. You said it was brunch and we could eat, so I was snacking on my cashew. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. I'm E.R. Ship. I'm a longtime journalist, and now I'm a journalism professor at Morgan State University in Baltimore. We are a 7-year-old institution, and we were just accredited a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, Jarvis.
Hey everybody, Jarvis DeBerry. I am the recently named editor for States Newsroom, Louisiana. We are looking to launch our website out of Baton Rouge within the next few weeks. Before that, I was at Cleveland.com as a columnist, and before that at NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, as opinions deputy editor and columnist. This is my first time being able to join you. I've known Richard for many years, but because I've never lived in Washington, I've never been able to participate in these. So I'm really excited that technology has made that possible. So
they're here. Now, don't you have, oh, go ahead.
So I was just saying, great to meet you all.
Yes, it is. But don't you have a job opening you wanted to tell people about?
Yes, we're looking, I should have led with that. We are looking to hire 2 more reporters for State's Newsroom in Louisiana. So if you know of any qualified people that you can send my way, I have sent Richard the job posting, but what I'll do after I finish my introductions is post it in the chat. If you can share it among everybody that you know, I am looking as hard as I can to find as diverse a pool of applicants as I can to start with, and that's been a struggle thus far. So if you can give me any leads, some people I should reach out to, I would really appreciate that. So nice to meet you all.
Or recent graduates?
Including recent graduates, yes. Varying experience levels. I'm just looking for talent.
Great.
So thank you.
Okay, and that should be in the notices that went out yesterday. All right, Joanne.
Hi. Well,
Hi.
thank you, Richard, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. As Eric was saying, Street Roots is a street paper, just like Street Sense, and we've been around for 20 years. We are sold on the street. We're sold by about 180 to 200 people experiencing poverty and homelessness. And we're a professional news outlet, while the vendors who sell the paper make 75 cents out of the dollar they sell. They buy the paper for 25 cents. We produce a weekly paper that goes out to about 10,000 people. So we have a small editorial staff, and we rely on a large body of freelancers to work with us. And we do try to focus on social justice issues, but it's not just homelessness and it's not just poverty, but issues of economic, racial injustice, incarceration issues, environmental issues, all kinds of policy matters that really affect people in marginalized situations, marginalized populations. So we kind of run the gamut. So, yeah.
All right, welcome. Glad to have you. Gloria.
Hi, I'm Gloria Minot, formerly of WPFW Radio. I am not retired, but kind of enjoying some of the fruits of that. And there's not very much more I can say. Thank you.
That was good. Okay, Annette? Oh, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Okay. Annette Alston, I am the author of Harriet Tubman for Beginners. I am a retired teacher after 32 years and currently spending more time doing what I love, which is writing. I am working on the autobiography of a local grassroots organizer named Lawrence Ham, chairman of the People's Organization for Progress, and delving into what's going on with COVID and its connection and the impact that it's having on Black people, doing that also. So trying to keep busy.
All right, and she's in Newark, New Jersey. Okay,
Yes.
Chris.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm sorry, my name is Miguel. That's my middle name, but I don't speak Spanish, so I don't go by that very often. It's my actual given name. Hi, I'm Chris Miguel Arnaudy. I'm the author of a recent book called Dignity: Seeking Respect in Back Row America. I spent 7 years documenting through photography and interviews poverty and addiction in America, including homelessness, sex work, all of that. Unlike a lot of the books on that subject that are done, or at least newspaper articles that are done in the elite media, my book focuses on all forms of poverty, both in red states and blue states, and among minorities, among whites. I literally put 400,000 miles in my car over 7 years, driving all over the United States, going to various towns that people, at least the more elite media, tends to ignore. Places like Gary, Indiana. I went to Selma, El Paso, Portsmouth, Ohio, Lewiston, Maine, pretty much any place in the United States, except for the Pacific Northwest. So Portland's the only part I did not get to. But I'm very, very honored to be a member of this chat, and I'd like to thank all of you for inviting me.
Great to have you. Now I see something that says iPad 2. I don't know who this is. Anybody got an idea or want to?
I believe that's Sheila White.
Oh, okay. Because she's not showing herself. There's no photograph. Okay, Sheila, can you hear us? Maybe she needs to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Oh, I'm sure. That's me keep going.
What's that? Okay. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Sheila, you're on.
She needs to turn off, she needs to get out of Zoom in her other device. I think that's why we're hearing the echoes.
Okay, she's gone now. All right, I guess we'll get back to Sheila. Okay, all right, now we have Norman.
Hi, Richard. My name is Norm Parrish. I'm a longtime journalist. I'm now work for Report for America. I'm head of recruitment, and I'm based in Chicago. So
All right.
I'm glad to be part of this. All right.
Yes, yes. Okay, Pat.
Hello, I'm Patricia Gaston. I'm dialing in from Lawrence, Kansas, where I am the Lacey Haynes Professor of the Practice here. We just had our graduation, and I'm a long-term journalist, spent more than 21 years at the Washington Post. And I also spent time doing public policy work on homelessness. I work primarily with Miriam's Kitchen.
Okay, thank you. Todd. Todd, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, Senator King. I was busy looking up Nikita Stewart's background information because I wanted to know whether she was the same person that started with Barbara Kukla at Newark This Week. So that's what I was doing. Forgive me, my name is Todd Stephen Burrows. I read a lot. I research way too much. And Richard, I'm interested in talking with you offline about next month's roundtable because I think we should both look for Wilbur Rideau and find out.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, guys. Hello, everybody.
All right, Nikita.
Hello. Hi. First, I want to say, you know, during this pandemic, obviously it's been hard on everyone. But it's just incredible how it brings people together. So I am so happy to see Patricia and Miranda and Eric and Gloria. I mean, people I haven't seen in years. So this in a very odd, strange way is beautiful. So thank you for pulling this together, Richard. And thank you for having me. I'm a reporter at the New York Times. I have been several places, the Washington Post, the Star Ledger in Newark, New Jersey, the Courier Journal in Louisville, Kentucky. And for most of my career, I covered politics and political corruption. And when I got to the New York Times, I took a turn covering social services, something that I never did before. And frankly, I never really had that strong of an interest, I think because it was too close to home. I wanted to forget my own childhood memories, etc. And covering social services has ended up being the most fulfilling beat of my career. And I'm just so happy that it's turned into a book that will be shared with the masses starting on Tuesday. And I am great admirers of pretty much everybody on here whose work I have read and followed through the years. So thank you for having me. And I'm looking forward to this discussion, especially in light of the pandemic, you know, prompting unemployment, and the food lines are just, I mean, you've seen them wrapped around the corner. I'm working on a story about that right now. Eric, I'm working on a story about problems with ACS that are happening right now. You remember that. And so-
What's ACS?
Administration for Children's Services in New York City. So it's our child welfare agency.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
All right. All right, Sylvie.
I'm back in.
Hi.
Oh, Sheila, you're back. Okay, just in 1 second, we're going to have Sylvie and then we'll get to you.
I'm
Sylvie,
Sylvie.
please.
Thank you so much for the invite. I've been really looking forward to this. I'm a graduate student at San Francisco State University. I am originally from Canada. I've been here about 5 years, and previous to that, I was a reporter and a small newspaper editor for about 10 years. So I always like to turn my attention towards social justice issues. And when I came here, I decided to research the way that media covers homelessness. So that's kind of where I've drawn my attention now, and I've done a few research projects around that. And I'm just really looking forward to hearing from all of you. So thanks again.
Great, great. Okay, Sheila, back to you. Sheila, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I'm Sheila White. I'm a street sense vendor here at Washington, D.C. I've been homeless for like 7 years now. I just got housed 3 weeks ago. So, and I'm a 3-year college student. My major is photojournalism. I would like to share people's stories and get feedback on how we can eradicate homelessness.
All right. You know, we can't see you, only hear you. So if there's a button you can push.
I'm trying
maybe.
to find it.
Okay. All right, Sharon. Oh, we can't hear you though.
Okay.
Yes.
Sci-fi world.
There she is.
Aluminium science fiction gonna ride. Man, I'm drinking a beer called The Truth. Because this is where I'm at right now. Because it ain't happening nowhere, except with us.
Right.
We're the only ones telling the truth.
You cannot do journalism without Richard Prince and Sharon. You just can't.
I'm telling you.
I can't live without Richard Prince. I know what's going on. You all know what's going on too. That's why you're here. This is why Richard Prince has lasted this long.
Oh my goodness. It's because of all these folks helping me. All right.
Team player.
Yes, right on. Claudette. We can't hear you, Claudette. Unmute, please. Unmute.
Good afternoon, all.
Okay.
Hi, Claudette James, long-term journalist and educator. Currently have an emerging company, trying to emerge it once I can get through this pandemic, focusing on truth in education and journalism. And it's a consulting business. Basically, main focus is to advocate for quality communications in journalism and education. Currently in Rochester, New York, was in New York City, but the pandemic and everything else, I had to leave and return to Rochester, but hopefully we'll be back in New York City mid-June. So
right.
Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon. Okay. Nichelle. Oh, you're unmute, please.
Finally found it. Hard to see. I'm outside in the back. It's really nice and warm here. Michelle Smith, I'm an investigations editor at USA Today. Our latest project was 1619, not that one, but the other one. And I'm happy to be here Sunday to hear everybody. And as noted, I'm from Gary, Indiana, so I'm very interested to hear the reporting that came out of there. Thanks.
All right. Okay, Junette.
Hi, everyone. I'm Junette Pinckney, live and living color from DC native, former longtime journalist, largely broadcast, but also print for the Post, et cetera, worked for the networks. And I'm just joining in to see what I can learn this afternoon. Good to see you all. And I want to say hello, Mary. I knew you briefly when I lived in Charlotte for a hot minute.
Okay, thanks. All right, Wanda.
Hello, everybody. I'm Wanda Smalls-Lloyd, the author of a memoir that was published in February, Coming Full Circle, From Jim Crow to Journalism. And I'm also the retired executive editor of the Montgomery Advertiser in Montgomery, Alabama. And after I retired from daily newspaper journalism, working at 7 daily newspapers over the career, I came to Savannah, Georgia, to chair the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications. And I live in Savannah now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, George. We can't hear you, George.
Hi, I'm George Talbert. I am a full-time photographer and a retired U.S. Senate official photographer and a student of Sharon Farmer.
Okay, all right, Benita, our producer.
Pay attention.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Benita Bing. I am the president of the Exposure Group, African American Photographers Association. I'm also the owner of the Talbert and Bing Studios here located in Northeast Washington, D.C. in the Brookland area. So if anybody needs a headshot once this is over with, give us a call.
All right, thank you. Mary.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Mary C. Curtis, and I'm a columnist for Roll Call. Intersection of politics, culture, and race is my specialty. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am right now, home of the RNC, if they dare have it, and also Washington, D.C., which is where my office is, but, you know, haven't been there. And with places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and AOL's Politics Daily in my past. I also do television commentary for WCCB TV Charlotte twice a week, including tonight, which I will broadcast from my home studio, also known as the dining room. And I do also contribute to some NPR affiliates and NPR itself, including WFAE in Charlotte. And I'm a senior facilitator with the Op-Ed Project. I lead thought leadership workshops all over the country and the world, although right now we've been doing a lot of things virtually. So I was supposed to have been in San Diego, Washington, New York, but that's kind of been squashed for now.
Thank you, Mary. And Sheila, your phone is working. We got the video. Okay. All right, Miranda.
Hi. Hello, Nikita. She's right. It's been many, many years, but she was a marvelous colleague when we were both at the Washington Post, and Pat also. I'm a longtime reporter and editor. I'm specializing in stories about state and local government lack of transparency, which of course is all the more evident now. Eric, I'm a 3-time grantee of the Fund for Investigative Journalism, and I have actually a grant that we had to delay a little bit because of the coronavirus outbreak, but the story is pivoting now and should be in good shape pretty soon, and then I'll be in touch with you about that. And I did recently have a piece in Newsday about how state and local governments, to say nothing of the federal government, have basically been hiding the ball on data, details, and all kinds of information, which nursing homes are the most hardest hit, et cetera. And if there was ever a time for government transparency, this is it.
Okay. All right, Nick Charles is here.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with people I totally respect and have great affection for, E.R. Ship and Mary Curtis, particularly. I am a one-time journalist and editor who now writes for NBC.com. And I've been writing a series of stories about the impact of COVID on certain populations, African Americans, people of color, Native Americans, and underserved communities. And I'm glad to be on here to talk about the impact of COVID on homelessness and those who are homeless today and those who may be homeless tomorrow because of COVID and the lack of response by government officials. And I want to thank Richard for the opportunity. I am also the spokesperson for Save Journalism Project, which is an organization that is trying to get big tech, particularly Google and Facebook, to pay their fair share for the content that we create and they utilize on their platforms and don't pay us. Jarvis, thank you very much for your job listing. I have some people down in New Orleans who I can try to get in touch with you for if you need really good contacts and really good reporters for Louisiana. Again, thank you very much, and looking forward to the conversation.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm wondering if we left anybody out here. No, it doesn't appear that we did. Oh yes, Paul Delaney. Can you hear me, Paul? Unmute. Wait a minute. Unmute.
We can't see Paul.
I know, I can't either. Paul, can we, can you hear us? We'll have to get back to Paul then. Okay. All right. Well, since we have Eric here and we've mentioned the Fund for Investigative Journalism, tell us more about what that is and what's in it for us.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you again, Richard. I think
Yes.
more about what that is. We're in our 51st year at the Fund for Investigative Journalism. We provide small and mid-sized grants directly to independent journalists so that they have the resources they need to complete their investigations. So that includes funding for everything from travel and photocopying and public records requests to small stipends to help pay for people's time to do investigations. We have two ways right now of getting funding. One of them, we have 4 grant cycles a year, and so we're always in a grant cycle. We just started the new one, which means that that runs through September 14th is the deadline for the next cycle, and you can go to fij.org where you can get the grant application. We try to keep it simple and accessible and not too cumbersome or burdensome. If you do find it burdensome, I'd love to have that feedback. We're always looking for ways to improve and get better. There are things like sample budgets and stuff like that on the website to help you through the application process. So that's the first way, is the regular grant cycle, next deadline, September 14th. The other way to get support from FIJ right now, I think is really exciting, which is, I think for the first time in our 51-year history, we've done kind of a special grant program on a rolling basis. And this is for investigative journalism related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what that means is you can go to the website and see that streamlined application online, and you fill it out, and we literally go through and review those weekly and award grants in real time for people to do a range of investigative journalism related to the pandemic. And that includes some of the stuff that we're talking about, obviously, here today with, I think, as I've thought about, Richard, the way you talked about today's roundtable, to me, it felt like we're really talking about how we humanize and bring home both the causes and consequences of homelessness. And I think the grants that FIJ has given historically have helped do that. And we're always looking to do more of that. I think, very quickly, the one that I wanted to share with you all, obviously coming in new as the new executive director at the Fund for Investigative Journalism, I'm learning about some of the grants over the years that we've given. And there's one from last year that really kind of stuck with me as an example of the kind of journalism that I think we want to support and that I think many of you and your networks want to produce. It's out of KPCC, Public Radio in Southern California, with a really brilliant reporter there, Rena Palta, who did a really long look, a really deep dive into public records requests from all kinds of sources, everything from health department inspections to coroner's reports, looking at homeless shelters in Los Angeles County and the conditions that people were living in those shelters. And she then went out and interviewed a lot of currently and formerly homeless people. And she was able to document in this really in-depth piece some of the conditions around rats and rodents and mold and infectious disease. This is all a year or two ago before COVID-19, infectious disease and that kind of thing that was effectively, as many of you know better than most, was causing people to not go into shelters because they were unsafe, unsanitary, dangerous places for them. And this piece that she did and the people she interviewed for the piece really brought that to life in such a powerful way and really combined, I think, the humanizing aspect, Richard, that you're really wanting to look at with this panel with kind of the systemic and policy implications that I think so many of you have worked on in different ways. And as a result of that piece, which the Fund for Investigative Journalism funded and helped support and make possible, as a result of that piece, several months ago, the LA County Board of Supervisors passed new standards and new mechanisms to enforce those standards, to have some uniform standards in shelters in LA County, which certainly hasn't totally fixed that problem, but it has addressed, I think, the patchwork of standards that she exposed and the lack of any consequences for not meeting standards. And I think, you know, she won a Golden Mike and numerous other awards because of that work. So I think that's the kind of work we've supported through the years and that we're really eager to continue supporting and want to hear about. So I'd encourage you all to check out the grant applications on the website. Get in touch with me directly on Twitter or via email. I'd love to hear from you if you have ideas of work that we should be paying attention to. And again, just tremendous gratitude for being able to join you all this morning for the discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate that. Now, I think we're going to go to Chris. Let me see if I can call you up here. Miguel. I don't see Miguel. Well,
I'm here.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Okay. Very good.
I'm right next to you on mine.
Right. All right. Okay. A lot of windows here. Well, I heard Chris' appearance on C-SPAN in which he talked about his travels and the fact that he was able to spend so much time with the homeless people. And what struck me the most about his approach, which resulted in a book, is that he was talking about human beings and what they are like as people, rather than just as objects of policy. So I wanted Chris to tell us some of those stories so that we too could feel a little bit about what he felt and what we can take back to our jobs as journalists from what he learned. So go, Chris, you're on.
Thank you very much for having me. And I'd just like to say that I was very fortunate to be able to do my project, and it was 7 years. And I know a lot of people would, I basically was able to go 7 years without a paycheck. And I know that's something a lot of people could do a lot better than me if they had that ability as well. But I took a gamble. I quit my job and I dedicated myself to this project, never realizing it would become a book. But one of the things I was fortunate to have the time to do is just, as Richard mentioned, was just spend time with people and, and not feel like I had to get a story out of it, to do it because I wanted to be there. And I'm very, very fortunate to have been accepted in all these different communities. I mean, as you can see, I was primarily spent my time in largely Black and Hispanic communities, and I'm pretty obviously not neither of those. And I took a lot of personal risks, but I did it because, first of all, I think people are way too scared of engaging with homeless people or the poor. They have all these stereotypes that I tried to break that stereotype through my photography and my book, which is why it's called Dignity. The dignity I found in people who are living under a bridge. Richard talks about the stories, and what I try to do in the book, and what I'm really happy to hear from Sheila, who's on this call, is I didn't want to be in the book myself. I wanted the stories of the people I met to be in the book, but I tried to diminish my role as much as possible and elevate the interviews I had, because that to me is really what I think is lacking. So often we act as a filter, obviously when you're homeless, you don't have the resources to tell your stories. And I think one of the things I try to do, and I've tried to do, is use my resources to tell their stories and get myself out of the way, not to act as a filter, and allow the dignity and the stories to come through. Before I did this, I was a banker. And so for me, it was a personal awakening in many ways. I found myself spending a lot of time in churches. I now consider myself religious, having gone through the experience, because in many communities, all that I really saw that was offering hope to people and the homeless was churches. And so one of the things, there's over 8 years, you hear so many stories, they're hard to to tell, but the one that keeps coming back to me, and is, you know, with COVID, there was this drone photo. I don't know if people saw it, of people being buried on in trenches in New York City. That happens to be Hart Island, where people are always buried in trenches and have been buried in trenches for 100 years. And one of the friends I met in the Bronx ended up being buried there. And, you know, homelessness is, you know, when you're homeless, people just disappear. Friends just disappear. They usually I can find them in Rikers, or usually I can find them in one of the upstate prisons, or hopefully in detoxes. But there's one woman, Millie, who was a streetwalker. She just disappeared, and no one could find her. And I checked everywhere. I checked, you know, the websites for New York prisons, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, I checked Lincoln Memorial Hospital, and I found out that she had, in fact, died there somewhere around January 4th, I think it was. And then I tracked her body down to Hart Island. Hart Island is an island off in the Long Island Sound, right off of Hunts Point, where people from the Department of Corrections, prisoners from Rikers, actually, for day jobs, go and bury people in these massive trenches. And you can't visit it. You can visit it now once a month, sorry. You have to take a ferry. And so I did that process of going to visit. And one of the things that struck me at a personal level was Millie's story was never going to be told. Her friends didn't have the resources or the platform to tell it. And so I wrote her story. And one of the things that was interesting is I had a lot of people, my older friends who were bankers, ask me, what's wrong with being buried in a, you know, you're dead. Who cares where you're buried, you know? And one of the things that was really interesting was one of her street friends, you know, said, well, you know, your memory, you don't really die until your memory dies. And when your body's on an island you can't visit, your memory dies very much quicker. And I thought that was a really poignant moment. And it changed how I thought about the world, because I had been that very rational, cold-minded person at some level who would have thought the same thing, and yet, you know, here I was, having basically learned a valuable lesson. One other thing about Millie I want to mention is I got criticized at times because I don't fact check. I take people's stories as they tell them to me. I do that intentionally because I think if you're wealthy, like, you know, like a lot of my friends and I am, nobody fact checks you. You get to tell your story. You have PR people who tell your story. You have, you have media people who you support your story. People who are poor don't have that right. They don't get to choose how they're photographed, and they rarely get to choose how their story is told. And when I met Millie, it was at 2 a.m. on a street. And I was introduced to her, and at 2 a.m, as a complete stranger, she told me her life story, and I jotted it down in notes. 3 years later, when I did all the investigation of trying to find her body, I had realized, I went back and looked at notes. Everything she told me at 2 a.m. on the street was true. She didn't lie. She had told me the story, a complete stranger. She had trusted me, and I always will never forget that either, that, you know, there's this stereotype of the homeless, that they're shifty, they're lazy, which I hope my book, again, because the title Dignity, puts partially to bed this idea that somehow the homeless are you know, are breaking the law all the time, or not trustworthy. And, you know, I just will finally end, and I don't have to tell you people here. I can tell from everybody who's on here that I'm preaching to the choir. But one of the things that's most frustrating to me is when I see I'm a photographer, and when I see pictures of homeless people taken with telephoto lens, you know, from a distance, who don't show their face. What I try to do in my photographs is everybody's looking at the camera, and I allow the person, and this may come as a shock to some people who don't spend time with the homeless. Whenever I tell someone, I always ask them if I'm going to take their picture after spending time with them. inevitably, they always go to the bathroom and they clean up. And women often go and put on makeup. Some even go get their hair done. And I've been criticized as glamorizing the homeless, and I don't, it's their choice. People want to be seen in a dignified light. And again, we offer that to the wealthy. The wealthy control how they're viewed. We should also allow the homeless to control how they're viewed as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Chris? Okay.
Well, tell us where will we find your book?
I think the only place you can buy it right now is Amazon, unfortunately. It's been out for almost a year. I was very overwhelmed with the response to it. It did very well. I hope, it's photos and stories. It's been attacked. It's been criticized as without being read by some people as glamorizing Trump supporters, but 85% of the people in the book didn't vote. They're not Trump supporters. It's mostly people who were so, and excuse my language, feel so screwed over by the system, don't vote or are not allowed to vote because they have felonies. So, I try to make it as non-political as possible. Unfortunately, the process took place during the 2016 election, so it was hard to keep politics completely out of it. But it's on Amazon now, and one of the things I put a lot of effort in the photography, so it's I prefer the hard copy, but
Why do people think that? I'm sorry. Why do people think that you were making them out to be Trump supporters?
Because again, during the time it was taking place during 2016, there was a lot of stories being done and some, the kind of diner, the voter and diner stories that I kind of got lumped in with by some people. I mean, I did white communities as well. There are a few Trump supporters in my book. I did everybody, but the bulk of the book is non-voters. And it was hard to stay away from politics. It took, when I was doing the book, everybody had a view on politics and they told me about it.
So I've got a question about you personally, just in doing this. I mean, because you're a rich white guy, you don't have to. And I speak with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, being from Gary, Indiana, and seeing so many people come into Gary, A, with preconceived notions, and B, looking at the people in Gary, including those who are poor and homeless. They are part of just one massive zoo exhibit put there for your pleasure as people come in and take pictures and talk about the people and do what they're going to do. So from your perspective, when you embarked upon this, because you had the luxury of quitting your job, and just going and doing this exercise. What happened with you when you went back to your community? Did you find much of a community there among the wealthy white people that you knew? And how did this change you?
Thank you for asking that. One of the things I did my best was spending time. I spent about a month in Gary. I didn't want to be the person who jumps in and then jumps out. So one of my attempt to try to deal with that issue, I mean, look, I know I'm an outsider. And you have to be aware of that and the power differential that's there. And I think time overcomes everything. Also taking risks, I just walk everywhere I go. I walked all around Gary, which, a lot of people thought I was crazy, but, nothing bad ever happened to me. I got more hassle from the police than I ever did from people. And that's partially beneficial to who I am. I'm a large white guy. And so there's advantages to that, unfortunately. But one of the things that's been for me it's been hard to go back to it's unfair it's been hard for me to go back to my prior life because it's so frustrating. It's made me very political. I try to be generous to everybody, but sometimes it can be hard to spend time with my old banker friends, especially when they talk in stereotypes. Often they've been a lot more receptive to the message than I expected. I will say where I've gotten the most criticism that I didn't expect was on the religious front. I went from being a vegetarian atheist to being a McDonald's loving churchgoer. And I think I got a lot of pushback from people, some on the left, for talking about the important role of faith and religion. I think that surprised me the most.
Okay.
Chris, can I ask you a question about in all your travel? This is Nick Charles here in New York. I'm doing a story about COVID and the homeless, and I'm always suspect about the numbers that people put forward about exactly how many people are homeless in America. And I'm wondering, in all your travels, did you get a sense of whether or not this population is so undercounted that we don't really know how many homeless people there are?
Yeah, what is homelessness? Because, and I'm sure a lot of people on here have better notions of that. I was asked by Richard, how did I travel? I often slept in my van in Walmart parking lots. I don't know if people know here that Walmart allows people to camp overnight in their parking lots. Once you start sleeping in your van in Walmart parking lots, you start realizing there's a lot of fucking people sleeping in their cars in Walmart parking lots. If you go into certain Walmarts, especially in poorer neighborhoods, you can always find the corner which doesn't have as many lights, where you see vans and work trucks with sheets over the windows at night. There's a lot of people in Walmart stay open 24 hours so you can use the restrooms. I also stayed in cheap motels, and there's a lot of people, families unfortunately, who spend time in cheap motels. They may be there for 6 weeks. They may get a government voucher for 2 months. Is that homeless? I think it is, because you're temporary. The number of people who live volatile lives in terms of temporary housing, I think it's far larger than we recognize. And then there's the camps, the homeless camps that 7 years of traveling around talking to homeless people didn't prepare me for LA. I have never seen anything quite like Skid Row in LA. Almost every freeway in LA that you go, if you look, you can see people living underneath the freeway. So I think the short answer to you is I think it's a measurement problem. I don't think we actively measure correctly how many people are living short, only have a temporary home. And then secondly, I don't think you can count the number of homeless people we have. New York's homeless problem is not as bad as I would say it is as in other cities. It's bad, but it's much worse in California or El Paso or Las Vegas or Reno than it is in New York City by percentage.
Wow. Okay. Well, Sheila has written. Actually, she had a comment on the chat board, but she also wrote her story for Street Sense. So I'm going to ask Sheila to give us more. Oh, can you hear? Can we hear you? Unmute. Okay, I can hear you.
I've been homeless for 7 years, and I haven't broken no laws. I've been a teacher's aide and everything. I fell on hard times, and majority of people have fallen on hard times, and that's one of the reasons why they became homeless. And for people to always stereotype us and say that we're the crooks and things like that, we aren't. I mean, a lot of them wind up being schizophrenic for being out there 20 years. What you expect when no loved ones throw you out and you don't have nowhere to go? What you expect? The first place you hit is the street. You don't have anyone out there. You're alone. And a lot of people that sit out there, and even some journalists, they'll go spend 2 or 3 weeks outside. Try doing it for 10 straight years, 24 hours a day, and see where your mindset will be. And if we can get the world to understand that is a big problem, and I like what you guys are doing. I mean, I'm not, getting on the guy that was talking. I was listening to him, and I thank him very much, because he's trying to understand how a homeless person feels and what we go through. And those are things we go through. We go through weather climates. We go through being sick. We go through all this. But everybody say that we're the crooks and we're the thieves. We aren't. A lot of people are sitting out there in Panhandle, they ain't even homeless. They had a guy out there, I know he wasn't homeless, but he's panhandling so he can get gas for his car. I mean, people do all kinds of things, but they blame everything that goes wrong in this city, they blame on the homeless person. And I don't think that's fair. And it just upsets me that people condemn me for falling on hard times. People condemn a lot of other homeless people for falling on hard times. I mean, it's many thousands of reasons why people left their homes, because they didn't have any family left, and a lot of other reasons. I mean, we all know, we can figure out, we can name a lot of them. I mean, that's one of the reasons why when I got with Street Sense, at first I thought my life was just gone. When I got with Street Sense, I decided I wanted to be a photojournalist. I would like to take pictures of people to let them shine and let people know that they are human beings, because they do treat us like, I feel like I ain't had nobody. I mean, I feel very alone, afraid, scared, you know, always had to sleep with one eye open. I mean, it's hard out there, and especially for a female. And then we already got one thing against us, we Black, so they automatically think we crooks. You know, and you don't even have to be homeless. They think you're a crook because you're Black. And that's not the case. And we need to, you know, find a way to stop all this stereotype of homelessness.
Sheila.
I have mental illness out there. A lot of them do, and a lot of them didn't get it until they became homeless.
Somebody had a question? Oh,
Sheila, where are you located? Where were you located?
I'm located right here in Washington, D.C. That's where I've been born all my life.
Okay.
Okay, now you said that being Black is one thing that was a problem.
That's a stigma. That's a problem all in itself, just being Black. The first thing they say is, you know, well, that guy or that woman, it's going to be a thief. You know, we still in this old stigma that, you know, a Black person's always a thief. We aren't thieves. We loving kids just like any other race does. But they portray us in the media as the bad guy. And they still doing it. Even with the movies our kids watch. I rarely watch TV now. You know, it's just, it's degrading to me. But I just know I just want to change what's going on in this world. And by me being homeless before and becoming a photojournalist, I think I could share a lot and learn a lot. And I'm learning a lot from you guys now, just listening to y'all, for real.
All right. Well, you said the other thing that was makes things harder is being a female, being a woman.
Yeah, being a woman out there, you know, I got robbed out there. Somebody could have killed me. They could have raped me and everything. That's what made me want to go in the shelter, which I refused to go in there for 3 years until I got robbed. I mean, that was the scariest thing, just being out there with nobody to protect you, you know.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sheila, what is your status now? Are you no longer homeless? Are you?
I just received my place 3 weeks ago. I'm sitting in front of my dining room table right now.
And what are you studying and where in school?
I'm in UDC, third year college, studying to be a photojournalist.
Oh, excellent. We should talk later.
That's what I said. I like this panel.
Okay, for the journalists or I guess Eric and others, I noticed that AP just came out with a style ruling against using the term the homeless, and said
it's supposed to be instability. I never could pronounce that word that fast.
Well, they say we should call them people first, homeless people and homelessness, rather than the homeless, which they found dehumanizing. Is that something you all agree with?
I don't know.
Part of our style for
homelessness
years.
and poverty, mostly. And people who are experiencing homelessness often prefer the term unhoused versus
unhoused. There you go.
Unhoused. Okay.
Okay.
That sounds like one that would be very difficult to get like a New York Times to use.
Yeah, I bristle at unhoused myself and usually use people experiencing homelessness. Again, because homelessness is is an experience and not an identifier necessarily. And it's often something that you may experience at various times in your life. And maybe it is, you know, as Sheila was saying, a 10-year stretch, which honestly, we do know that the average time of someone experiencing homelessness is many years, or it could be multiple times through your life after an eviction or after, you know, any kind of criminal justice engagement. So anyway, it's a lot of things that can happen in your life. So it's at the time you're experiencing homelessness is the term that we prefer.
Okay.
I know that's generally how I try to write it. Someone experiencing homelessness. When I'm interviewing people also, when I talk to them, I'll often ask, well, when was the last time you had permanent housing? Not, you know, when did you become homeless? But, you know, this is almost like an NAACP situation too, though, or, you know, United Negro College Fund, in that, you know, one of the most prominent organizations in the country, Coalition for the Homeless, that is how they refer to people experiencing homelessness. And so I think, I don't think you're going to see a change overnight in how people, but it's also how people want to refer to themselves. And so I generally just listen to people and listen to how they want to be identified.
I want to ask a question, either Eric or Joanne. I don't know who's doing statistics around this. One of the attendees mentioned in the chat about what's going on in New York, where they've closed the subway from 1 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. to clean the subways, but they're displacing the homeless who are, because they're unhoused, on those subways, usually at that time. And there were dramatic photographs of many unhoused folks on stairwells as they were cleaning the subways. I'm wondering, during this pandemic, is there anybody addressing how this population, which is very vulnerable, can be protected from the pandemic?
From the pandemic.
I guess I would say that I keep in touch with about 30 people who I met during my trips, who are in various levels of still being without permanent residence. They can't change their life. They just can't. And sadly, I think the reality is, and I say I don't want this to happen, but I think if you're homeless, you're going to be exposed to COVID. You know, as you mentioned, I would say about 10 of them used to sleep on the subways, and they can't do that anymore. But you know, you have to go to a methadone clinic, and to get to the methadone clinic, for instance, you have to ride the bus or the subway. Similarly, some people do panhandle, and they're still panhandling. So the people I know have not changed their behavior. They can't change their behavior. You know, shelter in place, you have to have a place to shelter in. And if your place is a crowded shelter, literally, I just fear, unfortunately, that people are going to get, if you're homeless, you're going to be exposed to COVID.
Go ahead, Joanne.
I'm sorry. I can just speak for what Portland is doing, and as our organization, you know, we have the newspaper, and then we have the people that we work with, and then we also are a big advocacy organization. And one of the things we did early on was push with the city, and we've worked to create 3 camps downtown, actually city-sanctioned camps for people to be in their parking lots. Now, again, it's horrible. I mean, these are folks who are still sleeping outside, but they're allowed in. But with these spaces, at least they're not going to be hassled by police. They have a healthcare station. They have wash stations that have been set up. The 3 camps are identified by communities of color. The other camp is for LGBTQ communities, and then also for just mixed use anybody. So people can identify as they feel comfortable in the community they want to stay in. So we've done that, and we're also advocating for hotel and motels to be opened up. And there's been a little bit of that for if you're symptomatic or you're showing or you're ill. But we're calling for them to open up, you know, these empty motels and hotels, throw some of these, you know, massive amounts of dollars towards helping the hotelier, to supporting them, to using this as maybe like, let's put a plank down that's a foundation to say when this is all over, we do something different about homelessness. And that this is a stepping stone to actually creating a solution. And really, if we're going to be thinking out of the box now with having these camps downtown, with setting up wash stations, which COVID or no COVID have always been needed. But in this environment, we're really seeing this laid bare, all these weaknesses, all these cracks in the system, and all the suffering that we're seeing. To use this, you know, if we're not coming out of this doing things better, then this is all for naught. And so that's what we really want to see happen. And, you know, maybe now people are kind of realizing, because there's a lot of conversation, as you're talking about there, about how it's like now it comes, you know, right in front of your face, how fragile and vulnerable people's lives are when their situation now is literally a life and death or death situation that we all understand now. Even if before we couldn't understand how being homeless for 10 years meant that you died 20 years earlier, you know, or all of those issues. So I don't know, I get kind of really passionate about it because it's people are realizing and feeling concerned and for people experiencing homelessness, but it's always been, you know, a trauma, a day-to-day trauma, as Sheila has been assessing, talking about. So anyway.
I'm wondering from a legislative point of view, who's looking at this thinking, okay, when you get the virus, it manifests in 5 days to 2 weeks. Now with this pandemic, somebody said this months ago, it's going to bankrupt more people than it kills. When those folks experienced 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months of homelessness or unhousedness or not being able to have a permanent home, what's the plan when they join a camp when we have in Portland? Is that they're going to just expand that camp? Or, and again, that's a temporary fix.
Well, I don't know if you're asking me specifically.
No, I'm just asking if you know if anybody's leading it, not you specifically, but if you're closer to the situation in terms of who in official power corridors of power is looking at this and saying, okay, these are things we have to look for 3 months before school starts in September, kind of thing.
Right.
When families who may have been impacted are living in their car, their vans, or doing whatever they have to do to keep their families safe.
Yeah, I don't know. We're calling on the state again to do more institutionalized, long-term, you know, hotel, motel, housing options for people. So I don't know legislatively, and certainly nothing out of the federal government gives me any hope. So
I do know that. Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to say that I did find out in the course of this that there is a congressional caucus on homelessness. Which let's see, who's that? Barbara, Sheila Jackson Lee, I believe, and I'll have to look up the other person. But anyway, I didn't know such a group existed in the House, and so when you talk about legislation, they would probably be the ones. Now, I wanted to introduce Barbara Reynolds. Let her introduce herself since she wasn't. She joined a few minutes ago. Barbara, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay. I'm Barbara Reynolds, journalist for, 55 years now. But my last job was editorial board member, USA Today. And of course, you know my book, I wrote the memoirs on Coretta Scott King. And this is my favorite group. And I'm so glad that you have this panel, because I've been thinking and wondering when I saw the stories about people being moved from the trains, and you know, I didn't understand. Now where are they? And this is so educational for me. And of course, I want to know how I can help Sheila. I don't want to just pick out one person, but since she's in DC, it might be easier for me to help.
Mm. Yeah, you put a message out in the chat room.
How you doing? I put my information up there on.
Okay, all right.
It's on there. You can get it off of there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good.
God bless you.
All right, let me move on here to Street Sense. And there was a story in the Post the other day about the status of Street Sense, which is that they, like a lot of other newspapers serving homeless people, had to stop the print publication because not only the financials of the publication itself, but the customers weren't there anymore if they're all being quarantined. So why don't you tell us about that, and also in general about how Street Sense is doing?
Sure. So as far as our vendors, we stopped printing our paper in late March as businesses were shutting down and our customers were disappearing. We've, essentially 130 folks that distribute our paper have been laid off. There's limited income still available for folks that contribute to the paper. We pay for submissions. But the biggest push that we've been trying to get the word out about is that, we're still producing news, we're still producing the paper online only, and you can still pay our vendors. You're not receiving a print product, but we have an app, and all money that's provided to vendors through that app is paid out in cash from us directly to them. There's no cut that goes to Street Sense or anything like that. So the biggest thing has been trying to reconnect with our audience, because not everyone that read the print issue is online, et cetera, and getting the word out that we're still here, and the most important thing, our vendors are still here, and these avenues exist to be able to continue to bring income to them. We've also, as an organization, developed a relief fund. So our case management department, which has been around for several years, is working one-on-one with folks to provide rental assistance or cover a utility bill or whatever, gift card for food, whatever the case may be. So we're, doing what we can, but the amount of money, if you just divide it evenly amongst all our vendors that's coming in on the app, is nowhere near what an individual would make on average through street sales. So it's certainly been a struggle, and we're trying to still trying to navigate this as the health crisis continues. As far as what's going on in DC, I'd like to come back to what Nick brought up. And what's been going on here is that we are using hotels in a limited capacity. There's, I believe, 4 that are open to folks that are symptomatic, and we've had several hundred shelter residents test positive for COVID-19. And then we also have had 1 hotel, and it's about to become 2, for individuals that were identified as being especially vulnerable. So whether you're elderly or have an underlying health condition or something like that, then hotel was being provided just for those individuals. And while all of this was going on, our housing assistance was paused. All of the what's called the coordinated entry system to match people to housing was just put on hold. So the one thing that could help protect people most sort of was not functioning. But that's now being put back into motion, and the first people that are going to be housed now are the folks that are in those hotels in a preventative measure. So I mean, the city is obviously trying, but this is several hundred people of the thousands that are experiencing homelessness, and there's, as Sheila mentioned, there's still plenty of people in shelters. People are only being moved out as they test positive, and there's no way to distance yourself in a shelter. Like Eric touched on from the KPCC reporting earlier, a lot of people choose not to go to shelters because of the conditions there, and are vulnerable in other ways for staying outside, but many folks are choosing to stay outside instead, to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. Can you just expand a little more about what these vendors are doing to survive now that they don't have the paper to sell?
So a lot of our vendors, I've learned recently, are working through Uber Eats and DoorDash and companies like that, just on foot. As far as our paper goes, the big thing is contributing to our paper and receiving payments for our content through our app. So there's and receiving assistance through our relief fund. So the answer is they're doing everything they can, but there's not a lot of options. This was the low barrier job opportunity for a lot of folks to turn to, that was essentially put on hold once we suspended printing.
Can I also say something about Street Sense?
Please.
Street Sense wasn't just a paper for me to write my story and get my story out. It's also an educational program-based program for me. because we have writers groups there where I learned how to write effectively, and I'm still learning to write. I mean, my writing still ain't up to standard, and I'm a college student. But I mean, I go to writers group. I didn't even pick up a camera until I met Street Sense. I mean, it's more than just telling my story. I mean, it's an educational site for me, you know, and it's somewhere for me to go.
All right.
So I just wanted to just put that out there.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And
All
could
right.
I
Well,
say one more thing based
yes.
on that? So yeah, I was listening to that C-SPAN talk you mentioned with Chris. One thing he'd said was you can find dignity in other ways, such as the creation of art, or you know, through being a community member. And I think that's a huge thing that is a part of street papers, like Sheila just mentioned. That's one of the
very good,
sort of,
very good.
You know,
All right.
values of ours. But based on what Sheila said about education too, that's another thing that we're working on is skills training and preparing folks for, you know, career pathways. We've been applying for a bunch of grants right now to redo a process that we piloted last fall, where we pair freelance journalists with our vendor writers to co-report stories together and learn those skills along the way. So we're looking to build a network of freelance journalists outside, you know, through our core of vendor writers, and by using, you know, hiring them enough, getting those freelancers up to where they would be freelancing with other outlets in the city as well, leveraging hopefully leveraging some of our partnerships to do that. But ultimately wanting to provide pathways to employment and to diversify our core of local news reporters.
Okay, very good.
Hey, Richard, this is Benita.
Yes.
There are two people that have their hands up, Claudette James and E.R. Ship. I'm not sure if they want to make a comment or have a question.
Okay.
This is Ship. One observation, here in Baltimore, I believe the mayor has started putting people in hotels. So that might be something to check into. I had a question about what is happening in terms of quote unquote homeschooling for school-age children who are part of the vulnerable unhoused population. Does anyone know what's going on with children?
Yes. My grandkids, all of them have computers. They have classes every day. So does me. I'm in UDC. I can't do face-to-face instructions now. So we do all our classes online. You know, even the lab work, we just do it online through the books. So everyone in DC that's school age or in college are online doing schoolwork.
So they're given computers?
They're given a
laptops?
They've been given laptops. And they even go on website or Zoom or some site like that, and they be instructed through their teachers.
I know they've been talking about it here in Baltimore, but I saw a statistic that still quite a few students have been lost. No one knows what's going on with them.
That's the only thing I wonder myself.
Yeah.
The majority of the students in DC are online.
Ship, I think one of the issues with that is the ongoing digital divide, where some students, whether they're in cities or in rural areas, don't have the capability to get online, whether or not they have the physical tool of the laptop or the iPad to utilize. They don't have the access to the high-speed internet. And that's one of the issues that the education folks have been worried about, is that when you talk about a digital divide in education, is there folks kids who are disappearing from the system because they don't have the ability to get online or have to share certain products, the iPhone, the iPad, the laptop, with other family members, and can't get on to actually do the learning.
Yeah. So at some point, we've got to look at the impact of all of this on these children's education.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, Comcast in DC, they have this where I just got it. I ordered the internet since I moved for little enough, and just $10 a month. So they're also, Comcast and them are giving out deals also. So people who can't afford, like, you know, top speed internet, it'll be enough internet so they can access their computers or their phones or whatever the case may be. So that's one thing DC has been doing. But like I said, we still have people that are vulnerable and like got homeless children. Where are they learning that? That's what I worry about.
Right, right.
Sorry, Sheila, I didn't mean
Fred.
to step on your words, but I just did a story not too long ago about homeless liaisons in rural communities. So
we were losing them.
A lot of you are on the East Coast in more concentrated areas, but in Oregon, we have a lot of rural communities. We have a lot of native communities and reservations where, like, I think Nikita someone was saying, oh, Bruto, if I'm pronouncing that right. We're saying that it's not, it's about Wi-Fi access, and they're handing out Chromebooks to everybody, but if you're in a car and you're in the middle of nowhere in Southern Oregon and you can't get the Wi-Fi, and the homeless liaisons, all schools have a McKinney-Vento, or most schools have a McKinney-Vento homeless liaison. They've been scrambling around trying to set up, and I'm not a technical person, but where you can kind of set up these connections through phones. However you can do, like, just, they're trying to reach people, but no, people are falling through the cracks. Dropout specialists really should be talked to during this time, trying to keep these kids in school. It's really tough. Yeah, it's a really good point.
I would just like to
Can I jump in, Prince?
All right ahead.
Am I good?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is a very, very passionate topic for me. I recently retired from the Ithaca City School District as an assistant superintendent. And what we're seeing across the country, and definitely that rural piece is a huge part of this, because in some of those rural communities, you do not have internet access. However, there is absolutely no excuse why every urban area in this country should not have direct internet access for every child. The issue is not that everybody wants to give children computers, but computers do not educate children.
Right.
So I think a huge piece of what's missing here is we need to get out to these school districts and say, what programs are your teachers who are all still being paid full-time, what programs are they delivering to the children who were in their classrooms? And so I've heard a couple of times, more and more communities have what's called hotspots that are being distributed through their library systems to homes where children may not have that access to the internet. So that's one way that school districts need to take full responsibility for educating every child. And as journalists, we need to hold them accountable. The highest tax rate in this country is to the education system. Look at your bills. And we need more and more questions to these educators. And we can't say we gave children laptops. That's like giving a child a water balloon if nobody is teaching these children what to do with laptops. So, I mean, I can go on and on this one. For our homeless children, at least in New York State, every homeless child who can be accounted for should be connected to a school system. It is the school system's responsibility to identify homeless children, at least in New York State. The challenge with the United States of America is that the education system has been fractioned out to the states, then the states fractioned it out to the local communities, and you have just people writing and doing whatever they want to do. So journalists, that's where we need to come together and start holding these school districts accountable, that they should be, every school district should be providing education to every child, including homeless children.
All right.
I'll
rest.
Sure.
Sorry. Okay.
Can I just say something?
Yes, please.
I mean, I think, you know, all of this is correct that everybody is saying, but I think that what we've really gotten out of this time are two really important things. Obviously, we need national health care because the fact that somebody else is sick and could make me sick it's in my interest that they have health care, right? If you can't see it as a public good, you can see it as a personal good, a personal need. The second thing is that the internet should be treated like it's a public utility.
That's right.
And it's not up to the
Definitely.
schools to make it
No.
available. It's actually, it should be up to the states. It should be publicly regulated, and it should be available to everybody, like electricity.
Can I just add?
Yes.
I would just say that, yeah, I agree with Miranda on that. But one of the chapters in my book is called McDonald's. And if you ever spent time with homelessness or the homeless, you know why I would spend a lot of time in McDonald's for Wi-Fi and for charging your phone, and for, I talk a lot about for being in a public space, effectively a public space, and doing it in a dignified manner, being allowed to sit there for 4 hours and not be chased away. One of the things I mention to people, and I'm a big believer in education, don't get me wrong, but if a homeless person went onto a college campus, they would call the police on them. When a homeless person goes into McDonald's, they're generally welcome. But to the Wi-Fi thing,
True.
To the Wi-Fi thing, so I'm now a big McDonald's fan, despite the fact that I didn't used to be. But to the Wi-Fi issue, that's one of the big draws of McDonald's, is they have, you can sit. I literally wrote my book in a McDonald's, nowadays what McDonald's has done when they've closed the dining room, they've kept the Wi-Fi on, and you'll see lots of cars parked in the McDonald's parking lot next to the Wi-Fi, basically using it for kids to do their homework. But I completely agree that it needs to be a public utility. People shouldn't have to use McDonald's parking lots, but that's currently the state of how it is.
But Chris, the McDonald's that I go to, and it's not frequently, but I see signs that say you can only be there for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or while you're consuming food. And I assume that was a move to prevent homeless people from spending time there.
Wow. Those signs are pretty common, but they rarely are they ever enforced. One of the things and I think Sheila can talk to this a lot more authoritatively than I can. A lot of the people who work in McDonald's are people who've been homeless, who've experienced homeless, have a relative who are homeless, and so one of the things I've noticed, and believe me, I've literally spent probably about 2 years of my life in a McDonald's. My process of working is to be blunt, when I come into a new town, I go to the poor section of town and I sit in the McDonald's for about 2 weeks. But a lot of the staff are very, very tolerant, because they know people who are homeless, and they have friends who are homeless. A lot of it depends on the franchise owner. Some cases, I can walk into McDonald's and I can tell you if the franchise owner, excuse my language, is a jerk or not within 3 seconds, by how well it's run. And I'd like to hear Sheila's experiences on that.
Yeah, that was my spot, McDonald's. I mean, I think that's one of the spots that, you can stay a little longer. I used to, matter of fact, brush my teeth in McDonald's. I go use the bathroom. Well, then they start locking the doors on us, but, you still have quite a few McDonald's in DC that you can just go to and just sit, unwind, drink a cup of coffee if you have some change or whatever. And that's what I did. I used the McDonald's to brush my teeth, wash my face, just to stay presentable looking, I didn't want to go fall down by the wayside. I was already down as far as I think I could go or wanted to go. So
I think there's a one out there, and the one I used to spend time in Washington D.C. I believe is out on New York Avenue.
Why are you gonna say 13th New York Avenue?
There's a lot.
That's it.
I lost a lot of money. I lost a lot of money to people who hustle chess in that McDonald's.
Yeah, that's where all my coffee money went, and Egg McMuffin sandwiches. Yep. That's the one.
One of the things I think also Chris and Sheila add, well, for the group, is when you look at something like McDonald's, you talk about tolerance. I think it's also empathy from those who work there. You don't see that empathy in some of the other franchises like a Starbucks.
No.
Where many cases where the police are called when certain kinds of people come in and don't buy a coffee after 2 minutes.
Right.
One of the stories I remember, and this is bittersweet because it shouldn't have happened, but there's a McDonald's, and I don't know if for those who grew up in the South, Robeson County in North Carolina is a really interesting place. It's the poorest county in North Carolina. It's 1/3 Native American, 1/3 Black, and 1/3 white. But I spent a lot of time in the McDonald's there, and it's open 24 hours, and so a lot of homeless end up there. But one of the workers who worked the night shift would come in, and her 4-year-old child, would sleep in the booth while she worked. And everybody, all the regulars would watch that child. Again, that's
wow, that's good. Yes.
No, I wish she had another way. I wish she didn't have to work the night shift, and I wish she had help someone else who could watch her child. But she
had to do to survive.
Yep.
It's called survival.
Okay, let's move on a little bit here to Sylvie Sturm, and she, as somebody mentioned, you mentioned LA having a big, Chris, having a big homeless issues, but San Francisco and the Bay Area certainly do as well. And there, the media organizations all got together and decided that they were going to spotlight this issue. It's called the Media Project. And Sylvie can tell us about that, but also she evaluated the media coverage in that area that was promulgated by the Media Project and elsewhere. So, Sylvie.
Hi, yeah, it was called the SF Homeless Project, and it was sort of spearheaded by the Chronicle newspaper's managing editor, Audrey Cooper. And the story goes that she was walking down the street with her 2-year-old child and saw a couple in a tent living on the sidewalk having sex, and it just spun her head. She got offended, and now that origin story has changed a little bit on her part, but so she decided to contact all of the 80 or so Bay Area news outlets and have a 1-day homelessness coverage blitz. Actually my mentor, Dr. Laura Moorhead, who's a professor at San Francisco State University, started to gather all of these stories from 2016 and then beyond to 2017 to see if there's been any actual permanent changes since then. And so I've gathered actually about 1,000 stories, but at about 300 last year, I compiled them and analyzed them and checked them for statistics. And so the statistics were pretty interesting. And, when we talk about the thing that was highlighted to me is that they really use an episodic framing device, which is just to look at each individual person who is experiencing homelessness as a single sort of entity, as opposed to putting it into a systemic or a bigger causal kind of factor. So so basically the takeaway for me was that this homelessness blitz, the story on homelessness, what it did was just kind of exhaust people. It made people even less empathetic because it didn't connect to the humanity. It just perpetuated this us versus them, us and then them kind of binary, rather than using language that is inclusive, and rather than using the voices of people experiencing homelessness as experts in their own experience in the system. So the only time they would sort of talk to homeless people were to talk about how they failed or how they, whatever it is that their story is that created this crisis in their life that ended up homeless, and then they turned to other people for expertise, and they took all the politicians and the government officials' words as at face value. So really, what it turned out to be was, I think, and I haven't borne out all of the data yet, but I do think that the empathy factor actually was diminished, and I could see that in a lot of the comments that you see online for stories. Now, you think this is a liberal city, but I mean, I'm from Canada, so maybe I'm like super uber liberal, but this liberal city has got quite a mean streak, you know, when it comes to homelessness. And you know, and of course, I want to say there's a lot of actual journalists here that are doing amazing work. So that's, but unfortunately, that's kind of they're you know, not the norm. And even just for one last comment about what is going on during the COVID-19 pandemic is, so the city, the last I heard, the city has secured 1,000 hotel rooms for people who are unhoused. And I was listening to an NPR affiliate here, KQED, have this discussion, and the discussion was centered around how are they going to keep the hotels secure? Are they going to hire security guards? How are they going to deal with people with unstable people who could be dangerous? How are they going to deal with drug abuse? And their main guest was the journalist of record, the main expert in homelessness, Kevin Fagan, who works at San Francisco Chronicle, who lived on the streets for 3 months. But his whole angle was, I don't know, for me, it was a very negative slant on what this meant for the hotels, you know? So that's my experience here.
Who was that who lived on the streets for 2 months?
Kevin Fagan.
Okay.
He's the San Francisco Chronicle homelessness reporter. I interviewed him at length, and my whole big thing is that I think that people who've experienced homelessness should be interviewed as experts in a broader sense. They should be able to comment on society and on poverty in the same way that experts comment on them. And so Kevin Fagan has a different take. He thinks that people who have experienced homelessness are too, he didn't use the word far gone, but are too embroiled. They don't see policy in a way. And it's like, it's laziness on the part of a journalist to think that they could just walk down the street and talk to a person on the street and think that they're going to be an expert on poverty and homelessness. Just like every journalist does, you have to research and find, you know, the key people to speak to who can speak to this, you know, knowledgeably. And there's a movement here in Oakland, actually, called Homefulness, and it's a group of people who are part of what they're calling the Poor News Network, and they're all formerly unhoused people, chronically poor people, and they're building their own sort of community. And the main person in charge is Lisa Garcia Gray. Tiny is her name, and she's written a book called Poverty Scholarship. So it's a real eye-opening way to take a look at how people who've experienced poverty can be knowledgeable and have their own form of scholarship, you know, academic expertise.
Okay, let me ask the journalists what they have to say about what Sylvia is saying about how the homeless people are written about and discussed. Why do you think she feels that way? And what can we do about that?
Well, you know, one of the things, they are, if not an invisible population, they are a population that we like to keep in our blind spot. And the communities we cover, we always look at the point of view of the folks who live there. So whether you think you are in a liberal San Francisco or the liberal Upper West Side, or liberal Soho or liberal Upper East Side, the way they look at the homeless is how us journalists sometimes look at the homeless. And if we keep framing the conversation from that point of view, or from government officials, or from the police, because it's a criminal justice issue as well, we're never going to get an accurate picture. And we're never going to get to the humanity of those who are unhoused.
I totally agree, Nick, that's part of it. It seems to me that, looking at my newsroom in particular, more and more journalism has become like the art world, where it's more and more the domain of people who already have and who can take the luxury of taking a couple of years to be a reporter and before going on to do other things. One of the debates that I was in this week to shed a little light on was that there was a story going around that someone out in Gannett's network had written about how they'd forgotten how to drive because they've had to spend 2 months inside with their kids or something. And And it was going around our newsroom, and people were co-signing, like, you know, oh my God, I just haven't seen the light. One of the cars won't even start. And, you know, part of me it's just really calling BS on this whole thing. Because, I mean, my God, we've been inconvenienced, mildly inconvenienced for all of 2 months now, right? Maybe I'm jaded. Maybe it's just because I got to go to Africa last year, and I see that standing in line is sort of just the normal way of life a lot of times there, and what day you're going to have water or what day you're going to have electricity becomes an actual thing. So for journalists there, and I include myself as a person who lives out here in a suburb someplace, for us to be writing about forgetting how to drive, or you know, some of the, oh God, there's a shortage on you know, top sirloin, I'm going to have to settle for stew meat. I mean, just, you know, get a perspective, get real, okay? And I think we
Also,
have
I think that,
in the newsroom who are coming from backgrounds like where I'm coming from, Gary, or backgrounds like where Sheila's coming from, and backgrounds like, you know, just a variety of backgrounds is missing from the people who are doing the covering of the news.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, as the ranks of journalism too have been thinning, and you see the kinds of people who are going into journalism, as Nichelle has said, you know, are people who can afford, in a sense, to have, you know, these internships. And so you don't see as much diversity, and a lot of the newsrooms aren't as committed to it, a lot of programs. So the people who are journalists are people who haven't been homeless, don't know folks who have, and they do look on it, you know, they want to think that they come from an unbiased point of view, but they generally don't relate, you know, at all, many of them. And even so much so, I've seen even some stories, of course, not from the folks like Nikita and others on the panel, where they're talking to so-called experts about people and not actually talking to people. And you can see this in so many areas, you know, when they talk about people, workers, or people who work as delivery people, and it's clear they don't really know anybody that are in that particular circumstance. So
right.
Exactly. So they want certain journalists to be in the room to give them that perspective, so that they can go out and report on the person. But the missing part of that is, I can give you a source that works at the McDonald's or wherever, but how you talk to the person is key. You can't just go and talk to them at arm's length, or, you know, dial them up on Twitter or what have you and get a perspective. You have to actually go down and talk to people and get where they are and get an understanding, if you don't have that understanding of where they are and where they're coming from. And that's a missing part for a lot of newsrooms. We just don't have people who know how to talk to other people on different levels from themselves. Different
I found that there's a way, I think that there's a big piece missing for journalists themselves to identify with people who have experienced homelessness, and even the journalists that I've interviewed who themselves have experienced homelessness. They've lived in a car, they've lived in the garage. They don't see themselves as having ever experienced homelessness. They think that because they weren't living on the street, they were homeless. So there needs to be a sort of an education that builds a common humanity, I think. And you know, if that means having journalists take crash courses, again, from, I can just think of this poverty scholarship sort of movement, but to realize that it's a common humanity that we're talking about when we talk about the experience of homelessness. It's not that far-fetched.
Better yet, hire a journalist who has been poor, who grew up poor, who grew up different than somebody else. Why should there be a poverty scholarship? Just hire somebody who has the writing skills from that neighborhood and let them do what they need to do to tell a real story.
How do you actually do the reporting these days, though? How are you socially distanced and all that kind of stuff, and actually find the people whose voices we want to include?
Well, I think if you go back, I think the problem is a problem of a lack of shoe leather. Before this happened, folks weren't actually going out and meeting anybody.
I know that, but how do we do it now?
Well, now the same way, like I write all my stories from home, You find people who know people who will send you in the right direction, and you pick up the phone and you call people and you email them and you make time to actually have conversations. And you don't rely on official sources.
Can I just jump in here real quick? I'm sorry. One of the things I find frustrating is I think journalism, I don't blame the journalists themselves. I blame the organizations that are running the journalism, because they don't have the money to go out and do what I did, for instance, which is spend 7 years in communities, or even a week in communities. People are hard pressed with time. And I think a lot of journalists have lost the skill of actually interacting with people. And so the prevalence of data journalism, I think, is a really bad thing. It's like, I just reviewed 2 books on that were talking about something similar to myself. And one of the frustrations was how much data they used. Data is a way to ignore voices. It's a lazy way to say you understand a problem without really understanding the problem. I learned my whole views on life changed because I listened to people over the course of 7 years. I actually got out there and listened to them. And I actually went out and talked to people, and I let them teach me as opposed to me condescending and telling them what their problem is. So I find the frustration that the obsession with data, I think, is both intellectually wrong, but I also think it's a way for the people who run media organizations to basically be cheap because they don't have to get out there and have people go out and do things. The other things I think is when you write stories about poverty, it's always going to have ethical issues. And no matter how well you're intended, you're going to mess up at times, and people are going to accuse you of messing up at times. And I think some people have used that as an excuse not to do the stories. Rather, so you have all these ethical rules about how to operate. That basically means that it's just simpler not to do it. Anytime you write a story as a journalist, you're going to, with the rare exception of people like Sheila, you're going to have a privilege gap. And you have to understand that privilege gap. And so many things can go wrong there. And people are so quick to accuse you when they go wrong that a lot of people just don't want to do it because of the ethical minefield. I will just simply add, there's also, I think, a societal reason we don't humanize the poor, which is, I used to be a banker. I know lots of bankers. There's this really nasty belief amongst what I call the libertarian wing that the people who are rich deserve to be rich because they're better than other people. And so when you don't look at homeless and you don't listen to them, that's an easier story or narrative to believe. Once you actually start hearing their stories, you have to grapple with the reality that maybe you're rich not because you're talented or more valid as a person, but maybe because of the situation you grew up in, or because of luck. So I think there's a lot of reasons people don't want to humanize the poor or the homeless.
Well, Chris, let me ask you, first of all, let me just tell the group that I did find the co-chairs of the Homelessness Caucus. It is Eddie Bernice Johnson from Texas and Alcee Hastings from Florida. So those are the 2 chairs in the House Homelessness Caucus. But back to Chris, when you say that there are ethical issues in covering the homeless, what do you mean? What more ethical issues would there be than covering any other beat?
There's a perfect example of when I was in Portsmouth. I found a homeless couple that was pushing 2 kids in a shopping cart. I saw it for a week. Do you call Child Protective Services or not? I ultimately did. I think a lot of people, I got criticized for it. I sometimes don't know if I did the right thing. But I felt like at the time that I was doing the right thing. How involved do you get with people's lives? I've taken people to detox. I've driven them to hospitals. I drove one woman across the country to visit her mother, to go home to her mother. I got involved in their lives in a way that I think a lot of journalists are not allowed to, or would feel uncomfortable to. I've let people shoot up in my car. These are things that I think a lot of people have issues with, and I understand them having issues with them. But I was not operating as a journalist at the time. I was operating as somebody who was trying to be a good person and do the right thing.
All right, does anybody else have any comment about that? How they may have handled situations like that, fear of getting too involved in the story?
you know, it can obviously be difficult when it comes to how I treat anybody. I treat everybody the same, basically. You know, the same way I take out my sources for lunch or dinner, I do the same for somebody living on the street. Where do you want to go today? So we can have a conversation. And as far as if someone's life is in danger, because I have been in situations where someone appears to be passed out to the point of, oh my goodness, could something be happening here? You know, I have called 311. I have seen a mother and a child I was concerned about on the street, because in New York, it's very unusual to see families on the street. And, you know, I have called people in Department of Homeless Services and been like, hey, I've seen this mother on the, you know, I talked to her. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. You know, I'm not planning to do a story, but I wanted to call this in because I'm concerned. And that's just being a human being. And I think it's important for us to realize that. And before we leave, there's something else that I want to mention, is that we talk so much about, when we're talking, we talk about it in, and yes, it's serious and it's sad, and you never want anyone to experience it. But one of the things that I strive for in my stories is to always show the laughter and the good times, because people laugh every day, even under the worst circumstances. And you talk about humanizing people, and that is just always important to me. You know, unfortunately, I've even heard people say when they look at photos, this person looks too happy. Like, are you sure they're homeless? It's like, what? What are you talking about? And so I don't know why I just wanted to say that, because it really bothers me when I'm reading stories and there is absolutely not one smile, not one, because I know that's not true. I know it's not true.
Nikita, I'm so glad you said that, because I put humor in my book and I got a little bit of criticized for it, but I wish I had put more humor in it, because one of the stories I'd like to, I'm sorry to talk too much, but one of the stories I tell is, I remember when I was under a bridge in Hunts Point above the Acela train. It was a shooting gallery. And at 2 a.m, somebody came in and they had stolen an entire cake, and we had because it was somebody's birthday. We had a little celebration, a birthday celebration. It was a really sweet moment, and it was funny. And you know, when you don't put humor in it, that was one of the things. I read a book recently, and part of my criticism was everybody was a victim. There was no fun in it. There was no, and you know, it's hard to imagine that you can actually have, you know, humorous moments, because they're people like everybody. There's some good people, there's some bad people, there's funny, there's unfunny.
But a reliance on stereotypes is just about as akin to if you go to Africa and you see something other than babies with flies in their eyes. I've seen people just sort of report that over and over and over again, and skip the variety, because that's what their editors want to see. That's what their editors expect to see. And up until they get certain points of view that reinforce. So it's almost like, you know, it's confusing sometimes. It's frustrating sometimes. It's like, go out there and get the real story and get the truth, and then when you bring it back, it's, well, that's not the truth that we want to see.
Well, you have to keep fighting that. You have to keep fighting against that. And that's what Black folks have been doing for years, when editors thought that they knew what Black people were all about. Right. And we'd have to tell them that there's something different there too. Before we get too far, I wanted to ask Sylvie, where do we find your work, your research?
Well, at the moment, it hasn't been compiled into a academic paper, but I had a video on YouTube that sort of gives an overview of what I had compiled then last year. So I could share that link.
If you can put that in chat, please.
In chat, sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
So one of the things I wanted to follow up on what some of the folks were saying is that all of us bring baggage and history to the computer or to whatever tool we're using to collect journalism. the empathy gap is huge. That's one. Two, the reality of what modern day journalism is about, which is all racehorse and tension and the quick bite and the quick story and parachuting in and parachuting out, has left so many of us short of the skills to actually do the work, understand what we're doing, and then be able to believe and not be afraid of our subject or our subject matter. Because there are actually folks who are afraid to approach people in prison, afraid to approach folks who are on the street, are just afraid of these stories because, one, they're too hard, and also because they're afraid of these populations because they don't know how to approach it. No one has taught them that these people are human as well. And if they don't learn to do that, we're going to miss out on a lot of great stories going forward.
Right. Okay, I've noticed that our chat board has been active, so be sure to check that for some observations from the participants. I guess we should be winding down. I wonder whether there's anybody who has something to say that they didn't have a chance to say earlier. No? Okay.
You got me thinking about
Yeah.
my first book that actually, but it never got published, about 20-something years ago, before self-publishing became vogue and everything. And basically it was a series of stories surrounding teenagers that were going through various situations and modes in life, and it really spoke to various conditions that existed at that time. And it just made me think about maybe I need to revisit that. I've written, other things, of course, since then, and kind of put that aside and didn't know what to do with it. But, it might be worth revisiting even in terms of where they are now, and so it just got me thinking.
All right.
But thank you. But there were times where I felt like I was becoming a part of the story, and I had to kind of pull back and just make a mental decision in one case to become a part of it to help somebody out. But then, so I could relate. That's all I was really thinking about.
Okay. Now, Nikita, we want to hear about this book that's coming out on Tuesday.
Okay. Oh, yes, I'm unmuted. I wrote a story in 2017 about a Girl Scout troop in a budget hotel that had been turned into a shelter in Queens. And the story went viral, everybody went crazy, and I realized there was a lot more story to tell, and I wanted to see what happened to the girls and their families in the months to follow. And so I followed what they call themselves the OGs. I followed the OGs and their families for more than a year. And so the book is about the challenges and the triumphs, the trying to find a home and get out of shelter, to like really finding community and hope in an organization like the Girl Scouts. I didn't know how much, an organization going to a meeting every week, how important that would be in, I guess I did know, but just to see it unfold, to see how important that was to the lives of these girls. I feel like I'm not gonna cry today. You can watch me cry probably on Wednesday with Greenlight Bookstore. I'll put that in here too. And I should appear on Brian Lehrer at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on WNYC.
Well, tell the people who are not in New York about Brian Lehrer's show. How can they? WNYC?
Yes, on WNYC.
And what day was that for his?
That will be on Tuesday. That is the day the book comes out. I have a lot of support, including endorsements from Nicole Hannah-Jones and also Chelsea Clinton, of all people. And so there'll be a lot more to say about the book soon, hopefully. And, I hope you all will read it. It's not only, I guess, a commentary and look into homelessness in New York City, but just to, as Chris Miguel has talked a lot about today, the dignity that people want. You know, I used to think that the book was about, because I wrote it, you know, I was sitting there like, oh, the book is about, you know, wanting to find a home, wanting to break out of homelessness and poverty. But the book is also about how everyone, all of us, we all have this need to be a part of something, be a part of society, and feel like we are giving to society and we matter. And I think that's what has inspired so many people who have read this book.
Hi, Nikita. What I always say about my book, and I hope, is people want to be a valued member of something larger than themselves. And so I'm really not surprised that the Girl Scouts would provide that. I saw it as, for me, it was McDonald's and faith, you know, churches. People just want to people want to matter. And that's how people find dignity. They find, you know, pigeon keepers. I did my first project on pigeon keepers, the beauty, the dignity of pigeon keepers, and it was more about the community than the pigeons. Just real quickly, and I apologize, what neighborhood in Queens does it take place in?
Long Island City.
Ah, I know that well.
Yes, the Sleep Inn.
I know the Sleep Inn. Oh my God.
And
not,
people can
not far
listen
from
to.
Queensbridge, home of Nas, Mobb Deep, etc.
Oh my goodness. And you can listen to WNYC online, so it's available to everybody. The Brian Lara Show on Tuesday.
And you can become a member. I think they're still doing their membership drive.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Richard, I just put some links to Nikita's book and to the original article in the chat room.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been, and I have to apologize to those who went to the Facebook Live page instead of to Zoom, and therefore did not get into the conversation. But I hope they were able to watch it on Facebook Live. And it looks like that was, I haven't been over there to see what chat material they have, but I hope that they enjoyed it as well. And I hope to see everybody who's interested next month for our next roundtable with Bill Drummond talking about prison journalism.
Richard,
so thanks,
I have
everybody.
one suggestion for you. If you do this and also simultaneously have it on Facebook Live or YouTube, you should have another person specifically monitoring that site.
That's a good idea.
So they can feed you the questions and you can have everybody involved.
Yes, good idea. Well, we're still learning this, so okay. All right. Well, anybody else have a last remark?
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, and this is recorded, so that I'll send out a link when this is over, so that people can watch this again or give it to somebody else if they want to. So, thanks very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you, Nikita.
Oh, good seeing you too. I'm gonna call you.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed y'all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Okay.
Right.
Ooh.
Oh, Lord. Whew. Wasn't bad, though.